Alright, so for part D of chapter 6, the last part that we'll be covering, we are talking about congruent triangles. Remember that congruent means of same shape and size. Congruent means same shape and size. Alright, so we, in this chapter, we'll talk about ways that we can find if two triangles are congruent because well, for two triangles to be congruent, that means that all their sides and all their angles have to be congruent. Okay? All their sides and all their angles. Now, a triangle is composed of three sides and three angles. Therefore, for two triangles to be congruent, all three sides on both triangles and all three angles of both triangles need to be congruent. So, congruence in corresponding parts. So triangles that have the same size and shape are congruent. They are congruent. So in this figure right here, we have triangle ABC. So here's triangle ABC, and here's triangle RST. By the way, this is how you notify triangles. It's just by writing a triangle, and then you write the three corners of the triangle. That's how you denote a triangle in geometry. Okay? So, let's see here. We know that, so it tells us that these triangles are congruent. And since they are congruent, that means their corresponding parts are congruent. Okay? So if two triangles are congruent, their corresponding parts are congruent. So right here, this angle right here corresponds, so angle R of triangle RST corresponds with angle A of triangle ABC. So these two parts are congruent, and you can see that in this figure they denote that these are congruent by writing a line, a curve. They're drawing a small line to signal that these are corresponding. Okay, so this means that these are corresponding. And they're congruent. Corresponding and congruent. So for this side right here, see how they have a line through this side and a line through this side over here, which is one line. So this is saying that this line, which we call AB, and we show lines with the two letters that connect the line and a line above them, like a bar above them. So in this case, line AB would be congruent with line segment RS. So because these figures are indicating that these are corresponding and congruent. Okay, and then here we have two lines and two lines here. So CA and RT are two line segments that are congruent. And then we see here that there's a double line through this angle right here and a double line through this angle right here. So angle ABC is congruent with angle TSR. Okay, so let's go ahead and define this. So what this acronym means, Cpctc, this stands for corresponding parts of congruent triangles. So corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. So you can see the Cpctc. Corresponding parts of congruent triangles are congruent. Okay, and that's what I just went over. Basically, that the corresponding parts, if two triangles are congruent, then their corresponding parts are also congruent. Okay, so in this part right here, it says show that the polygons are congruent by identifying all corresponding parts, congruent corresponding parts. Then write the congruent statement. Okay, so number one, let's write all corresponding parts. Now again, that there are going to be 6 corresponding parts because there's 3 angles and there's 3 sides. So let's name the line segments that are, let's name the line segments that are congruent. So here, this line right here is congruent with this line right here because you have a line signaling that they are both congruent. So we're going to say that the line AB, so we write AB and then we draw a line above it to signal that it is a line. The line segment AB is congruent with the line segment KJ. Okay? Now go ahead and see if you can find the rest of the other line segments that are congruent. So BC I know is congruent with KL because of these because of the notation here, and then AC is congruent with JL. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3. Okay, those are just the line segments though that we know are congruent. Now let's talk about the angles that are congruent. Now for angles, you'll see a lot of times it's written as angle A, angle B. However, you'll see in just a second that we can't always write it like such. So right now will be okay, but not always can we write angles like that. So let's see. So fourth, we know that angle A, so we have this corresponding with J. So those are two corresponding angles and they are congruent. So that means angle A is congruent with angle J. And then for B corresponds with K and they are congruent. So then for 5, angle B is congruent with angle K. And then for C, which corresponds with L, angle C is congruent with angle L. Okay, so since all these parts are congruent, since all 6 parts are congruent, we can say that triangle ABC is congruent with triangle JKL. So we just showed that all 6 parts are congruent since all parts are congruent of two triangles, then that just means the triangles themselves are congruent. So let's do the same thing here in number 2. Okay, so you see that these are still congruent triangles, right? We still have congruent sides and angles. So let's start with the first angle. Well, we'll do first side. So here's side AC, and it corresponds with this side over here, BD. So line segment AC is congruent with line segment BD. Then I have this line AB corresponding with DC. So AB is congruent with DC. Number 3, this line segment here. So these two triangles share a side. So obviously it means that this side is congruent whether or not it's on triangle ABC or triangle DCB. Okay, so that just means we just write it as BC is congruent with BC. Okay. Now let's try looking at the angles. So this angle A is congruent and corresponds with angle D. So angle A is congruent with angle D. Number 5, so B, which corresponds with angle C over here, so angle B. Oh, so this is actually I'm going to actually rewind, sorry. This is actually the idea that I wanted to show earlier, and that is that you can't always write angles as the letters. So angle A and angle D was fine, But as you notice here, that it's kind of hard to distinguish these angles right here because they share like a side. So for example, how do I say angle B without also talking about this angle B right here? Because angle B for one triangle is not the same as angle B in the other triangle. Okay, so we have to write it differently. So for angle 4, or for part 4, instead of saying angle A, I'm going to write it with angle, and I'm going to write it in 3 parts, from B to A to C. So I go B to A to C, where this one right here is the middle, the angle, like the corner of the angle, I guess you could say. So this angle right here, BAC, is congruent with angle. Okay, so here I started with the double angle. Okay, I went to the single angle and then to the triple line part. So that means to describe this angle right here, I'm going to say that this is angle CDB. So this is congruent. So angle CDB. Again, this angle, this letter right here indicates the corner. Okay, so it will make more sense here in this one right here when we're trying to describe that this angle right here is congruent with this angle. These are corresponding angles. Up here we call this angle B, but we can't get it mixed up with this angle right here because we're not saying that this angle is congruent with this angle or corresponding. We're saying that this angle is corresponding and congruent with this angle right here. So we're going to write angle ABC, and I'm writing that to go A, B, C. So this is the corner right there. So this is corresponding with angle DCB, because those are corresponding and congruent. So for the sixth part, we know that this corresponds with this angle right here. So I'm going to describe that as angle. Well, I'm going to do the left one first. So this angle, so that is angle. I'm going to call that ACB. So ACB is congruent with angle DBC. Okay. This right here is probably the more right way to write these angles rather than how we've been doing it before. Okay, so for this one right here, it just tells you that angle as for the congruent statement, we can write that triangle ABC is congruent with triangle DCB. Now for this one, it tells you that instead of showing that the parts are congruent and then concluding that the triangle is congruent, we are given that two triangles are congruent. Now we need to write the corresponding parts. Okay, so here we have triangle ABC. I'm going to draw a triangle ABC. So there's one triangle right there. Okay, and I'm just going to copy this. Okay, now the thing is, we know that these are congruent triangles, so I'm going to call this triangle A, B, C, and this N, L, Q. So these are the two triangles, and we know that they are congruent. So since they are congruent, then their corresponding parts are congruent. So let's label their corresponding parts. So A corresponds with N, and they are congruent. So I'm going to draw this line in that angle, signaling that they are corresponding and congruent. So this angle B I'm going to write a double line showing that these are corresponding and congruent, and then Q right there. So those are corresponding and congruent. Then line segment AB corresponds with NL, BC with LQ, and AC with NN. Oh, I should be writing 2. So this one will have 2, and this one will have 3. There we go. So let's just go ahead and write the corresponding parts. So 1, that is angle. Now, as far as, we'll go with the sides first. So line segment AB is congruent with line segment NL. Line segment BC, which corresponds with LQ, and these are congruent. And then line segment AC, which corresponds and is congruent with line segment NQ. Okay, as far as the angles go, as long as the angles are separated and not together, I'm fine if you just write angle A. But like in this one, where you have examples where they are the same, I need you to write your angles in this way, so that I know which one you are referring to. So angle A, which corresponds with angle N, is congruent. Angle B, which corresponds and is congruent with angle L. And then angle C, which corresponds and is congruent with angle Q. Okay, so that covers this first part. I'm going to be breaking down this video into different segments. So in the next segment, we will talk about the side postulate, and the other videos will consist of the rest of this. So, but yeah, so we'll see you in the next video.